minutes of November the 2nd. Hopefully everybody got an opportunity to review those.
Yes.
Are there any questions or additions that need to be made to those?
See none?
I as well see none.
Next item on the agenda is the committee appointments, the updates. Ms. Audrey Peoples, I don't see her. Mr. Lang, appointment to the DDA. Do you have anything you wanted to, any comments you want to make or?
Thank you for recognizing me. I just like to say that, I never participated on the, on any of the boards like that. The DDA board, under the leadership of Mr. Hensel, I mean, I really feel good about it. I feel good about the progress that they've made and continue to make. And I just love to be a part of it.
Thank you, sir. Is there any questions for Mr. Lang? Any questions? Okay, then. Thank you all. We'll move this one forward to the full body. Next, committee appointment is Mr. Former Commissioner Ralph Crenshaw to the Housing Commission. Do you have any comments, Mr. Crowe?
Yes, first let me thank Honorable Mayor and the Commission for allowing me the opportunity to address you in some of these issues. And really, we met with the mayor probably a little over a month, a couple months ago, and talked about the housing in Ben Harbor, and that it was our desire as the mayor to upgrade the housing stock in the city of Ben Harbor. Now, I think most of you know, and of course, I've been around, I've been in Ben Harbor 85 years, so I've been here a while, I served almost 30 years on the city commission, and I served 45 years in the planning business, But I think that looking at some of the issues that we have in housing is that now is an adequate time that we have opportunity to possibly move forward and address some of these issues. We've been talking about them for years, but one of the things is that we haven't had the resources, or in some cases, the resources and manpower and people in power to be able to move forward. As you know, now we have a Democratic, in Michigan, we have three top people in Michigan are Democrats, and of course the federal government is Democrat. So we think this is the opportunity time for us to move forward. In the meeting that we had with the mayor, we all shared the same concerns and issues, and as a result of that, I think that we now can make those changes, attempt to do those things now. The last month we had our budget committee meeting, and we approved our fiscal budget for this next year. And normally in December we kind of cut back because we have so many things and big stuff we have to get. We try to give our staff a little bit of break in December. But what we decided is that we gonna make some movements. I looked at our board, and really our board, sorry about that.
+12697590926.
I don't know these phones. But anyway, that we can move forward. And in order to do that, we'll be making some changes, at least in this next month. One thing is that, Reverend Bishop Atterbury is on our board. One of the things is I talked with all of the board members is that we're going to move Bishop Adams to assistant housing president too, so that he will be assistant, because there's so much needs to be done and we need a little bit more time. So we're going to move. I'm recommending, and I talked to all the board members that agree that we're going to recommend that Bishop Atterbury be co-chair of the Ben Harbor Housing Commission, so that he'll be able to move, because he has some expertise too that would be essential in moving forward, with the governor and the position that he has, and it's standing in the community also. So we're gonna do that with the idea that he will be co-chair of the housing development, possibly so that he will be able to help work with our executive director on some issues that we think need to be addressed to make our organization a little bit more secure. Also, I'm recommending, and this has also been discussed with all the board members, is that Eddie Marshall be working with Atterbury on a committee that will be dealing with personnel problems and policies and procedures, so that hopefully we can strengthen the organization from that standpoint and turn it to some things there.
I know you want to give an update. We do have a full agenda, and I think it's supposed to be set up for you guys to do a quarterly report, the Housing Commission, in this particular committee, and I think you'll have an opportunity, so you don't have to rush through, to give an update about what's happening in the Housing Commission.
Okay.
Yeah, This
okay.
one, right now, we're just doing our appointments to
Oh,
the Housing Commission, but you'll get an opportunity, Mr. Crenshaw, to come back and
okay,
do
with
an
the
update.
update. Yeah, all
Yeah,
right.
we can do an
yeah.
update to us, but right now, we're just talking about moving your appointment to the full body, and then it'll be voted on at our next commission meeting.
Oh, okay, so you'll let me know.
Yeah, it'll be voted on, I think our next meeting is the
Yeah.
19th, December 19th, and then it will vote on the appointment to the Housing Commission. But there's several organizations that will be coming back to give reports about what's happening so that we'll have an idea, and you'll be able to do.
Okay,
that.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
share that with you, but anytime, okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right.
All right.
The next item on the agenda, because I don't see the other appointments here, is the number 3 item, which is the ordinance to approve limited use of containers with improvements for retail, commercial, and public uses in the downtown. Yes, sir.
If I might, Madam Chairwoman, we drafted an initial document here to begin discussions. We talked with the attorney about it. He's got some additional work he's going to be doing on it. As was indicated in the draft ordinance that put out, the effort is to, our downtown area is missing a lot of the space that we need for commercial office and so forth. We can't make buildings right away to fill in that space, and we don't want to not have the business that should be taking place if we have space. The idea is, and I think you are all familiar, there's a container that's there now on the site of the old post office. That is the Downtown Development Authority's Welcome Center, I believe. And actually, Mr. Hensel did some work on this for us, where he looked at some other cities that were doing and had done something similar. What we're looking at doing is setting up sort of a temporary program with 5-year periods of approval to give permits for these big shipping containers to have windows cut in them, improperly insulated, utilities connected, some form of foundation, but not so that they look good and that they're suitable for what they're trying to do. And allow those to be used for commercial and office space in our downtown area until such time as the needed building starts to take place to replace it where we don't need those anymore. We also have, and I've heard several of your commissioners express a concern about a number of other containers that are showing up in the downtown area with no permits, no anything. And The idea here is that any containers at all will have to come through the city, get a permit for use, go before the planning commission for a site plan for what it is you plan to do, get a recommendation and be acted on by the commission. And we think it'll solve several problems. For one, get us control of this situation with these containers. Secondly, provide a temporary mechanism to address our own need and also begin to generate some tax revenue and additional disposable income in downtown. As a matter of fact, we've had one business approach us already asking about using containers for an apple cider tasting business that they want to put in downtown.
A what?
I believe the,
Apple cider tasting.
yes, the individual who approached us, I believe, has a processing facility already out in township somewhere and wants to have a venture like that in our downtown, which adds something else for people to do in downtown, builds on the other things that are going on relative to our district and all the other stuff that we're doing, farmers market activities over here. And I think this, the more meaningful activities that family-oriented activities that bring people in downtown with high disposable incomes that can help to boost our economy, I think the better off the city is.
So did you already have a sample ordinance that you were gonna bring, or?
Actually, it should be included in the package.
So I did send it to you guys, but I did fail to put it in the actual packet, but I did email it out to you, so it was with your agenda.
And as I said, we're not really ready to act on it yet. The attorney's going over it, we're gonna make some changes. So,
Is there any questions or comments?
Yes, Director Little, Chair, Director Little, will these containers be on city-owned lots? City-owned lots, or just,
they may be on privately owned lots in certain instances. It could be if in fact we have a location that's desirable.
and I'm sure they'll be colorful and
That's the whole idea, to make them attractive. Yes, absolutely.
and limited 10 or 15 or spread it out.
What we looked at and reviewed by the planning commission to see where and how they fit and go from there.
And anybody who can get a container.
As long as they meet, fulfill the requirements of doing what the code requires, what the planning commission wants to have done and so forth to make them look like they should and be a positive addition to downtown. And the thing about it, we're talking about improving in 5-year increments. So if 5 years from now, things will start to change and we've got an interest from people going to build buildings that provide this space, we don't have to keep extending it. But if that time runs down and still has not happened yet, we can extend it if we want for another 5 years.
So the ordinance will specifically say that it'll specifically be limited to the downtown area.
Yes.
So my other question is, so if there was a business or somebody that, was inner city that wanted to try to, start a business and wanted to utilize a container, would they be allowed to do that, or would they have to access a special use to do that? So they'll still have the opportunity, they'll just have to submit.
But you
Site
suppose
plans.
special use, right, site plan and all of that, right?
So my other question is, now there are a couple like homes and stuff, so those that are already, so for people who have already done some of this, will they have to go back before the planning committee? What will happen with people who've already done some of that?
That we're gonna have to discuss with the attorney, so if I'm under the impression, if they're already there and have already been permitted, that we may have limits in terms of what we can do in that situation. But this will deal with whatever's going forward.
You have to come on.
I'm not on your agenda.
You can make comments you can make comments as a citizen about what's happening as soon as anybody on the panel gets
Well,
finished.
I'd like to
I'll
speak on
open it up.
behalf of the DDA who've been involved in putting the,
But I'm saying you.
information together.
You'll be speaking as, on behalf of, as a citizen, because you want to get there.
so,
Does anybody else on the council?
so I could answer some of your questions, what I'm
I'm saying
saying.
they may have, the reason why I'm saying allow the discussion to happen, because you may be able to answer any of their questions as well.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
So the containers are they're gonna be heated and cooled as well?
It should be.
So-
And that's what we were adding in as a requirement.
Cause I was just curious on, from a temporary perspective. Yeah, true, plumbing. From temporariness, that's a smarter decision than like a pole barn? Is that, like, I don't know if you weighed all the options? Like how they put a slab down and they build that quick.
Similar.
It's similar? Okay.
Well, we're actually talking about buildings
Mhm.
made out of shipping containers.
Okay.
So they will have to comply with the building code. They'll have to comply with the structural code. They will have to have the utilities connected to them. They will have to have permanent foundations that they're bolted to in order to be structurally safe and sound. And they will have to go through site plan approval and the other processes. And all of that,
Before you.
we hope is going to be written into the draft that you have.
So how, they would have to connect to city sewer and plumbing lines and that kind of thing.
They would be buildings that are made of shipping containers. So not just a container like we've seen downtown that's just dropped someplace.
Yes. That's-
The whole
that's-
point of this is
yeah,
we
that's
want,
right, yeah.
we don't want to create blight even on a temporary basis. We're trying to alleviate blight and at the same time, introduce more commercial activity throughout the downtown. And if you'll notice in the fine print, it mentions the local commercial districts. Again, the point being, we've had 40 and 50 years to get developers to build, the buildings we need, and they have not. We have entrepreneurs who are looking for places to move their businesses as they start them up, and they can't find space in Benton Harbor that's affordable, or they can't find it at all. It doesn't exist. So if we want to see economic activity throughout the city and revitalization downtown, but as well as in those other areas, we have to come up with another building type on a different scale from what we've been thinking. And this is one way to get smaller spaces that can be starter spaces for people who just don't need a lot of space to conduct a service business. It's an opportunity. And the idea of a license for 5 years is more about not wanting to lock the city into a certain tax revenue base that's below what we hope it will be. And that if they really turn out to be blight, nobody's going to be obligated to put up with them beyond the 5 years. So if we find that this is just not working in any of the places it's been, we can refuse to renew somebody's license for a longer period of time in order to prevent them from being a long-term nuisance or a nuisance at all.
So if blight happened, so would the city remove,
No, this is all private developers
I understand
taking
that.
care of their own stuff and other.
That's what's supposed to happen.
Right, and it would fall under the same ordinances like the one you're talking
That's
about
what's
here.
supposed to happen.
If it's a nuisance, it's gotta go.
But I'm saying at that point, would the city remove that blight, that issue, if somebody just decided, oh, this is not working like I wanted it to, and they plumbed the place and all of that, laid a slab?
The owner of the property will be responsible for it, just like any other building. So it will fall under the building code, it will fall under the nuisance code that you're working on. And if they don't pay, you have the mechanism in your nuisance ordinance to put it on their tax roll and eventually to foreclose and take the property and sell it to someone who will take care of it and do what needs to be done. With code enforcement and a little bit of encouragement, I think we can get some of the activity we need to attract the more serious investment. And the idea of kind of choosing an area, limiting it to downtown and maybe a commercial district or two is to try to prevent it from being a nuisance and also out of control in terms of we've got all these sites to deal with while we're doing this. Other communities have made a success of this. They have permanent developments. A number of them are multi-story, and they include restaurants, and high-end apartments, and all of the like. So this seems like a good way to incrementally try it out. With this particular project that Mr. Little was referring to, with a business that wants to get started in our town, we have at least some demonstrated interest. There's interest on the part of several of the developers and property owners downtown to see whether or not it would make sense for them and how they might try it out. So it seems like a way forward to get us closer to the density and the amount of investment we want to see.
So I have one more question. So was there any talk of future? So we're saying a possible 5-year ordinance. Is there any talk about the future? So are we thinking about a certain percentage of the vacant lots can be geared to this project? So there is opportunity for real buildings to begin being built if we're saying that this is a short-term solution?
The ordinance is not a 5-year ordinance. The ordinance is the ordinance, and the period that a person could have a license is for 5 years.
Okay.
So if you're the property owner and you wanted to do this speculatively, you would come to the city, go through all the processes you would for a building, and then you have a 5-year license. If you chose to put another building because you want a 2-story or a 3-story building or mixed use, because we're only talking about commercial right now, at that point, you would need to come back. We have not yet, as a planning commission, I'm not speaking for the planning commission, but I am for the DDA, but I can tell you as a commissioner, we've not had a serious conversation about trying to do residential development and shipping containers in the city. Because Benton Harbor has no experience with this, if we're going to move down that road, we want to make sure that, again, we're not having people put up things that are uninhabitable and calling them housing, or that are creating basically sheds that they're putting something in.
He has a question.
I think you kind of answered it. So, like, for businesses getting started, there is no plan to do, like you said, double or triple, to stack.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
I've seen
no.
them that way.
Right,
and people
right.
create
Yeah.
houses with
Oh,
them,
yeah.
3 levels,
Right.
or what have you. So this is merely for businesses to start as an incubator portion of it.
Right.
Okay. And then where would parking be? I mean, I know it's small, but then is that going to be in the site plan at all, parking?
It's all part of the planning overview in the site plan review.
I have one other question. Go ahead.
The whole idea would be to provide an interim solution that's above storage sheds and pole barns and that kind of nonsense. These containers are very strongly constructed, and if they cut windows in them, they do the other things that are necessary, they can be very attractive and can, in fact, I know the DDA building catches a lot of attention from people going by looking at it and saying, what's that and so forth. So,
One concern that I would have, because I know we're talking about the downtown, since these are going on some city-owned lots, I would love to see.
That's not the plan.
No,
They could. They
okay,
could.
well, privately owned
That's
lots,
up to the
but-
city.
But if the city had a lot that we had that somebody that didn't own property downtown could actually do, if they provided the right kind of plan, could they actually, that would be, concerned, because I would love to see, some people that lived in the inner city actually get an opportunity, because they can't afford buildings downtown, they can't afford rent downtown or to do any of those buildings, to get an opportunity to get in, on this.
those local commercial districts that we're talking about, the city owns a number of lots. If you're talking about Empire and Broadway, there are a number of lots that have been in city ownership for over 30 years with no development whatsoever. And that has contributed to the decline of that neighborhood. And
But I'm
we
talking-
need
I'm
to
talking
see
with you
economic
specifically
activity.
About downtown.
Well,
I'm talking
and,
specifically.
and it's also true downtown that the brownfields have,
Locals from Benton Harbor downtown, that's what I'm talking
right,
about.
and there are brownfields
Yeah.
properties, I mean, there's one that would be ideal. That at Fifth and Water Street. And that would be an ideal site for multiple units that could create a strip unit, a strip mall sort of environment that could be attractive and successful.
Madam Commissioner.
Thank you, the chair. This is a day project, and thank you for trying to put a leeway in there for residents. First of all, I don't know if any of you remember when there was a presentation of a container that was made into a tiny house. I don't know what happened to it. It was, but I saw it, and it was just great. Now we're kind of hinting around at tiny houses some years later. But I like to see things fair and equal. If you look at that blue building, which is our, whatever they call it, there's no permit. When I look at this, what they're asking for anyone that wants to put a container on in the city of Benton Harbor, and that they have to have electrical permit and other things, and this one have none. So I did hear him say, well, maybe we have to grandfather them in when they come in wrong. No, this they project is not giving me a whole lot of information. DDA goes a long ways. They go all the way from Empire, all the way back up to Territory and probably Fair Avenue. I don't know. So that's a big area. And then to have this document say explicitly that we can't go in the neighborhood with any of this technology. And we're already talking about mixed use. This is what I hear the people talking about. Mixed use in the neighborhood. It would be the ideal thing to have one of these little containers regulated by our ordinance and anybody else's ordinance that they could do and put it in the neighborhood. But when you put stuff like this in documents that happen way before we get to the point of putting that in our master plan, that it should be taken out. I'm not in to keep hampering our citizens behind they projects. This is a they project. And I'm not into hampering our people with little words in a document that could be very legal at one time, approved by the elected officials. So it's all good, but you got to be fair, and you got to look at the future of your residents and stop always talking about brick and mortar, because brick and mortar die away just like humans do, but they're more important. So let's do something about this wording that's in there, and maybe explain to me why we can't do it in the neighborhood. Maybe that would be something that I would kind of understand if somebody could explain to me why we can't do it in the neighborhood. Thank you.
I can answer one of the questions.
Yes, I'd like to say that, first off, we're looking at trying some sort of control thing so we can see how well it works and so forth. One thing that people need to understand, if a person were going to get one of these containers, put a plan together, cut out windows, put in insulation, plumbing, electrical, and everything that needs to be, and make it attractive. That's not a small amount of money to do that. And we're not talking about financing folks to do this. So this would basically be something that would be in a controlled setting in downtown where it's around other commercial buildings and so forth. Not likely to have a negative impact on anything else that's around. Some places have done them for residential and some have done them in other situations that are mixed. That's something that could be looked at down the road, but what we are trying to address now is an immediate need that is manageable.
Thank you.
So I just want to say that I've seen projects like this in other communities that are really successful as far as commercial development and just having new life and energy into communities. So I do think I'm excited to see what this could look like. But I do agree with Commissioner here why, if someone comes to the table and they have to go through the same process as, a building process, why should it just be limited to downtown if they are able to check the same boxes, right? Particularly when we talk about these commercial districts that are in the neighborhoods. One, they have been traditionally blighted, which we would like to see them come back. However, one of the things that a lot of people here already know about is that the one at Empire and Broadway in particular, is in jeopardy of being demoed because of a project that was authorized through the city. And so here you are again, that's going to further disenfranchise this community, which we can use those properties to build this, to bring that community back. But if they're not going to be there, this could be a great alternative to see that happen. So to limit that to just downtown, when someone is able to just to check the same boxes as anyone else, to me, I think would be a further disenfranchisement of people. And to also assume that just because something is happening in the inner city, that people don't have the funding or the finances to make that happen. I don't even know why that is even an assumption. So the same resources that are leveraged downtown can be leveraged in other parts of this community as well. And so I would just ask that be considered, because why designate it to downtown? Make it a citywide ordinance, and if people have to come here to get approval, then you manage the process that way. So that's all I have to contribute to that.
So I had a question for anyone that knows the answer. Okay, so has anyone done any studies, or I know you have mentioned that other communities have done this, do we know an approximate cost of, getting the plumbing and heating and cooling? Is there an approximation? So if a business owner was very excited and interested in doing it, would we be able to give them an approximate figure? If you wanted so many square foot or you wanted one container, this is approximately what the cost you're looking at. Is any research, or even if we haven't done it, I'm sure if someone else is doing this, they would have an average figure?
No, we haven't. And reason being, just like when two people build houses, their prices are going to vary depending upon what materials are used, what contractors doing the work, what the overall market situation is at the time, and to try to give a cookie cutter type.
Well, I was just wondering about an approximation, because basically if we had an approximation, if you were a business owner, you would know if you're gonna fall into that ballpark or if you're not gonna fall into the ballpark. So I was just wondering if any research had been done. Yes, I understand it depends on your stipulation and what you want, but I was really meaning just like an average, go ahead.
So in answer to your question, not a specific, market analysis from that point of view. When it came to the particular building that the DDA is renting, first of all, that was a partnership between the city of Benton Harbor and the developer who owns that land and Andrews University that produced that building. And it was, that's why it exists at all. We just rented it. And in the process of that, we discussed with the owner the things that are missing that would make that building more successful. And the estimate that we have for connecting it to plumbing and providing the basic is something on the order of about $5,000. Now, that probably, in reality, when we check it out, they've already spent about $5,000 on the building that's there. But a lot of that was done by the students, design-wise, and some of the construction. So with the other comments, I just wanted to say the original discussion that begat this whole thing was specifically a response to conversations with people during the planning process of the master plan meetings throughout the city and the Women's Business Center. We don't have places in the city, in the neighborhoods, for people to open businesses. And that is part of what was originally discussed. As a citizen, I'm saying, I think that's a great idea. I agree 100%. And that was my intention as an individual. As in my other role with the city as a Downtown Development Authority president, I can tell you that it's not in my authority to say that any particular development should happen in the neighborhoods. And I don't want that to be misunderstood. So when I wrote a letter saying I thought this would be a great idea, can we look at doing this? It was from the perspective, and it's with the letterhead of the Downtown Development Authority proposing specifically that board is supporting this idea for those places. However, if you look in the listing of the districts that are included, I did put local commercial. And I put that in there because, again, I think some other board, or if the city commission were to charge the DDA board with the responsibility for overseeing development in other places or collaborating and overseeing, I'm not sure that the board would have any issue with that, but we don't have that authority. The Downtown Development District starts at Paw Paw, ends at the river, goes from the railroad embankment or right of way to the bottom of the bluff on Market Street. We don't encompass anything on Empire Avenue above Riverview, and we have no authority outside of that district as an authority. So we can't really help in the way that we'd like to, but the ideas anyway are free. So we want to see this happen, and we want to work with whoever wants to work to make sure that Benton Harbor gets the advantage of this.
Thank you. Commissioner Isom, you had a question?
Yes, can we put that in the ordinance though to have?
Absolutely, should be.
Yes,
I agree.
yes.
Because this is just a discussion about the ordinance. And so it's still being worked on. This is nothing that's going to be going before the body soon because it's still being worked on. So local, commercial.
It's listed in the listing of the districts, so it does say CL in there.
With each
Yeah.
district, Attorney Rock, with each business district in the city of Benton Harbor.
Yeah, and Commissioner, I received a copy of the proposed or working ordinance
Yeah,
on
and that's what I'm
Monday.
saying,
and I-
as it's being worked on.
Yeah, we're gonna
Because I
make,
agree with that.
yeah. And I think it's gonna have to, it should be reviewed by the planning commission.
It will be, they just said this, he was just bringing the
Yes.
discussion and then
Yes.
this can continue. We have a lot on this agenda and we have 3 ordinances that we gotta get to that's been on there. Thank you.
I just want to ask first,
Yes, sir.
where are we talking about? Is it in the township or in Benton Harbor?
In Benton Harbor.
But is it in the township
No.
at all?
It's in, we're talking about Benton Harbor.
You're talking about the Arts District,
So we were talking
that
about.
territorial?
Yeah, we're talking about.
How far does the I know what you're talking about, sister. Can I say what I want to say? I know you're in a hurry to go home and do whatever you're doing, and I am too. But you cut me off.
Go ahead, Mr.
Here we is another day with this mess again. You gonna be like the mayor and the rest of them? Take my whole thought pattern away. Where are our partners like the township? That's a lot in their area, and they have more service vehicles than we do. And we're always calling these people our partners. Why can't we partner with them and they take care of that area? They could have 2 or 3 trucks come through a couple of days. They wouldn't even have to have a container down there of blight in our downtown, a bunch of trash cans.
Not that kind.
We're not talking about, we're not talking about
What,
trash.
what are you talking about?
We're talking
Garbage,
about- No, we're not talking about trash.
boxes?
No, we're talking about, containers like, that'll be used as a building. That's what
Oh,
we're talking about, not
so
trash.
you want more of those downtown and you guys are saying that's okay?
That's not what
Is
we're
that,
saying.
what are you saying? You're gonna vote on it when? I'm trying to get an understanding. If you can't give it to me, can I get it from the director or
So we were talking
something?
about the ordinance, about how we were going to present this. So all we were doing was having a discussion about if we were gonna allow this, we have to have rules and regulations. So we were talking about the rules around doing that. That's all we were talking about, the rules, about around how somebody was to go about doing it. Starting, opening up a container business.
What has lights and gas and all of that in it, and they can live in and out of it downtown Ben Harbor? And
Not living it, just operating a business out of it.
I have some pictures pulled up if you want to look.
no, I'll wait. Thanks.
Next item on the agenda is the review of the nuisance ordinance, chapter 25. Chief McGinnis?
So we have been talking, actually, there's been a handful of ordinances that we have been discussing over the last couple of years. We're trying to get these finally brought, crafted, done to you commissioners for you to either up or down vote them. So we have been working on landlord liability insurance, nuisance, which we'll talk about tonight, store hours of operation, parking on lawns and ID parking. Our goal, what we're trying to do also, hopefully you found this helpful, everything that we bring to you, we will bring something, at least one of the items the next couple months, and to give a report on what the rationale and the changes are. So hopefully you find it helpful. Commissioner Henry, find it helpful? So for today, we think that we have, and Attorney Rock has been great. I didn't pay attention. He's been great. And we've been working together. So for chapter 25 nuisance, the rationale for the nuisance changes is that our ordinance was not very, it wasn't clear in some issues in some areas. We had some issues in courts. People were challenging not so much what they were cited for, they were challenging, and you can jump anytime, Rick, the language of which the ordinance spoke to and we cited for. And he spent many hours.
So, yeah, I've dealt with this for the last 8 months, maybe. And so what happened is when our nuisance ordinance, chapter 25, the first section is entitled definition. The second section is entitled illustrative enumeration. I had to Google that because I'm like, I'm not really sure what that means. And so I'm not the smartest guy in the world, or in this room, but I figured a lot of people are like, what does that mean? And I was not wrong because the judges were asking, Mr. Rock, what is illustrative enumeration? Nuisance, Your Honor. But the issue is when the county went to its new e-ticket system, it's got an automatic coding, and so it looks at the ordinance and it takes the first section, but if it has something like definitions, it rejects it. Then it goes to the next section, And then our next section is illustrative enumeration. So that's what it was putting on the tickets. And then once it's on the ticket, that's how it ends up in all the court filings. That's how it ends up in the court file. Even though when the person receives the ticket, generally, because we do in the notes, it says the building was condemned in 2017 and blah, nothing has happened, blah, blah, blah. But that the notes on the ticket don't really make it into the court file. So there's some confusion by the courts, there's some confusion by the defendants, and there's confusion by their attorneys. So what we did is we just kind of, we kept a lot of the, most of the language is fine. We just kind of, we rearranged some of the headings so that the very first section is nuisance in general, so that, and that the coding will pick, and the e-ticket system will pick up nuisance versus enumerated or illustrative enumeration. So, because illustrative enumeration is just, it refers to, here are numbered examples of nuisance. And so it gives examples of what the city considers nuisance.
So in this, you have in your packet, the actual ordinance. And where you see red are the proposed changes, and of course, this should kind of match with this. So, like Attorney Rock was saying, we just kind of swapped 25.1 to 25.2, kind of made it a little clearer. And we still have illustrative enumeration, however you want to pronounce it. But it makes it chapter 25.2, which shouldn't cause any problem. As far as 25, 9 and 10, requirements and specifications for unoccupied property. In 25.10, we're actually going to add a section that we did not have. In C, no building shall be boarded up for any indefinite period of time. We didn't have that. So there's been some loopholes that we had to kind of eat. And I forgot to even talk to you, Rick. There was some years ago, there's a property on Pipestone that's got a lot of junk in the yard. I had to throw that out because of the technicality. So we're trying to this was some years ago. And you see how until we get this fixed, we will still have that. But we're just trying to kind of close some gaps. But then I think this is a different, I wanted to put the penalty at the end. But that's what we're doing with 25. Chair will entertain any questions for that. We're just hoping to make it clearer. This just rearranging a little bit of clarity.
Any questions?
Okay. So we'd like to, if the boards will set it up to the commission to be considered. I think we're in good shape. I think as me and Rick kind of lay at home at night in bed, stuff comes to us. There may be maybe some minor tweaks between now and the next commission meeting, but that's okay. We would ask that it go to be approved by the full body. What are you laughing at?
Clarify that. Never
Yeah, because we don't have the landlord ordinance separate.
Yeah, I was getting that. Yeah, that was going to be up there.
So what?
The landlord.
Yeah, you give them an update on it.
Yeah. Are we?
Yes, so I would like to move move this to the full body unless there's any questions. Does anybody that's here have any questions about this ordinance? Go ahead, sir.
I would like to pose a question to the city attorney. From the discussion we had earlier today about the problem with demolitions, might there be some other changes, additions to this nuisance ordinance to try to help address some of it?
Well, so again, the city's got 2 vehicles to address the light and unsafe structures and dangerous buildings in the city. One is nuisance, but the nuisance also covers other things. But then we've got the International Property Maintenance Code, which is something that the city has already adopted. So the issues that we have to address are more internal and processes. And making a decision and which vehicle to use for a particular situation, and making sure that our processes are nailed down. So, I mean, do you have what other suggestions you have for the ordinance? I mean, I'm happy to talk to you about it, and Dan, I'm sure.
Just anything that will help us to shorten the period of tearing these buildings down when
Well-
they become dangerous.
Right, like I said, I mean, we've got, decades of buildings that we need to address, and it's gonna take some time, and we have to make sure that we are, even when we do things appropriately, the city's gonna be challenged. And so, but yeah, I mean, we're gonna do it as timely as we can.
I had a question to Mr. Little's question. So, 'cause we've talked about this, we've gone back and forth, we've even talked about it in the committees, doing it versus ordinance versus the property maintenance code. If we want the property maintenance code, I think it's a little quicker, can that still be challenged in court? And if it is, can that be defended because it's property maintenance code and not ordinance?
So property maintenance code, what happens is it requires, the city would have to send out notice, just like the nuisance, and state that, I'm trying not to, I don't want to get too detailed here. It can still be challenged. The example I'm going to give you is in St. Joe, that house on Main Street and Naker, the house with the tarp on the roof, which is no longer there. But that was dealt with under St. Joe's adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code. And that was challenged civilly all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court. So it can all be challenged. So is the gist of it. And so that just gets challenged in a civil court versus the criminal court and the district court that we've been dealing with under the nuisance ordinance. So nuisance ordinance makes it a misdemeanor. The International Property Maintenance Code makes it more of a civil situation.
Which one is more effective and efficient? I think that I don't think we necessarily care about.
It depends on the situation. If the city wants an order quickly from a court, then the nuisance ordinance is the way to go, because that ensures due process for the citizens, court review. It goes in front of a judge relatively quickly, the community court judge in Berrien County, and because they're misdemeanors, they are entitled to public defenders. So they are entitled to counsel. So that assures protections for the citizens to make sure the city's doing everything.
That's funny.
Right. So my next question was,
So
where you're
how will
going.
we make it? Okay.
So what was it, I'm about to ask you a question. So if the nuisance, the due process is built in is better, is it possible for us to decriminalize it from a misdemeanor to a civil infraction?
Right.
Once the order is the order, I personally don't care. I would, if they don't have to have a misdemeanor for, if you're throwing bottles at people and whatever, that's one thing. Is it possible within the nuisance ordinance to decriminalize it from misdemeanor to civil infraction? If it is possible, would we want to do that?
Well, as I've said before in other situations, most, if not all, of the Benton Harbor criminal ordinance violations are misdemeanors. They can any of them can be switched down, to be moved down to a civil infraction. Whether or not we'd want to do that, again, it just depends on, nuisance. Yeah, nuisance, we could do that. As far as others, it just depends on then.
That's what you're saying.
So you said depending on yeah, I was like, so depending on the severity of what's happening, yeah, it should be. Somebody throwing a bottle in the yard shouldn't get a misdemeanor for having, you know what I mean? That doesn't make sense.
What?
Yeah, but I think that the problem is, under the city ordinance, we don't have a civil infraction for littering. And so instead, then they just write it under state statute, which I think is a civil infraction, or there's an option for a civil infraction. So,
Wouldn't there be a process? I mean, before we're talking about misdemeanors, if someone had a nuisance, wouldn't there be a process of writing them a ticket or giving them a warning before it even got that far?
well, they do get a warning.
Okay.
And
They get a letter.
48 days,
Gonna be
48 hours.
No, that's not true.
So depending on what.
It's under nuisance, technically, it's close,
Yes, no,
it's
I
3
got
days.
it. No, they need to
So,
know.
Everybody whispering.
They have a staff.
Oh, wait,
Conversation is probably.
The city attorney,
Keep up
I was like-
with conversation.
but they, because it'll be make more sense to answer it, you know, in front of somebody had a question. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
She was saying, I was just listening, like it was 48 hours and he was telling her that that's not necessarily the case.
It's true, it is 48 hours, it's 2 days, I think.
I just wanted to kind of explain the nature of the question that I raised, so at least everybody understands. I think she's raising some of the same concern. Over a year ago, when we were talking about demolishing a bunch of houses in the city, we heard there was a list of about 50 of them. At that time, we thought the problem was the money to do it. I recognized that that was a situation that potential was there for us to make that a CDBG project where the HUD money could pay for it. So we set aside $350,000 to tear those houses down. Now, that's over a year ago. We have to, there are a bunch of hoops we have to go through for the bids to do that, which, for example, one is we have to have a SHPO evaluation by the Historic Society. We got that started. We have to go through an assessment for asbestos, and we got a contract ready to go and do that. But then we determined that we don't yet have clearance to go ahead and demolish it. So, and not blaming anybody or anything like that, just saying this is a solution to how to start a process that within a certain reasonable period of time, less than a year, that would enable us to tear those buildings down and get rid of them. Because right now where we are, we've had that 350,000 sitting there for a year, and we're going to get dinged come May 5th on not spending at the rate that we're supposed to spend. I'm gonna have to pull that money out of demolition and put it somewhere else that we can start using. Yeah, and it's just a question related to what can we do to try to, for the future, to be able to do that. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So can I answer the question as to the timing? So the ordinance says, the old ordinance says 3 days, but where we issued the notice, you have 3 days to abate. And the change that we made in this ordinance says you have 3 days after notice to abate, but then 24 hours after the expiration of that 3-day notice period is when the city can issue the citation. So it's 4 days.
And Madam Chair, also you have to remember that people have appeal rights also.
Right.
And those times vary. So it's hard to nail it down. If you got a bunch of money, like the house he was talking about in St. Joe, it was 3 years?
At least.
At least 3 years, he kept it going.
Yeah, go ahead.
I got a hard stop, man.
Yeah.
Like everybody.
I just wanted to make a comment about criminal versus civil. There is some writing that's been done recently and research on the effectiveness of blight ordinances and actually taking on the blight in the neighborhoods. And the results of the what I've been reading, it's on land bank reform and also just on neighborhood investment, is that where communities use civil infractions, they get results. And they get more results and more compliance because people are not threatened. And we have some local examples of situations where people have been, put in jeopardy of their freedom or, a large penalty of some sort. And, it tends to make them lawyer up and dig in versus come to an equitable solution that gets the community what it needs, which is to basically take care of the nuisance and the blight. So that's one thing. I can't find it right this minute, but I would be glad to share that information and at least suggest that you provide an option so that if there is a civil option, and again, because you've got these mechanisms to collect any funds that are put into these properties to manage the nuisance, the city still can recoup some of its investment. Another concern, as a citizen, saying this all as a citizen, I also concerned about saying that buildings that are boarded up need to be demolished simply because they're boarded up, or that they are maintaining a nuisance simply because they're boarded up. We have historic buildings throughout the city, including in the residential districts, that are can be stabilized and reused and ultimately would benefit the city to some degree. So to the extent where we have money tied up in a budget that's marked demolition, perhaps some of those funds could be used to stabilize city-owned properties and then market them to developers to redevelop. We're having the same issue with the land bank.
Before they get there, those properties have been demolished. And they are demolished because it has been determined that they can't be restored to a useful.
Well, we would have lost
but that's not
one of our major.
Sorry, let him finish. Let him finish.
Because we, I don't want to get us.
Yeah. I just want to comment on that, particularly when it comes to like condemned. I would be curious to know like what that process is like, because the house that we just bought next to our garden, which had caught on fire earlier this year, once we brought it through the auction and we had it assessed by a number of contractors and the developer, they said you would be foolish to tear this down. But it was a house that was on a list it was condemned, and it was going to be one of those homes that was going to be demolished. And we found out after we bought it. So it was something that did, like, though it had caught on fire, it was not a bad fire, and it was listed as condemned. So that's one thing. But just echoing what Rich had said about civil infractions versus misdemeanors, I think the process begs to be looked at, because particularly with Alex, what he was talking about with the city not being able to reach a certain deadline to demo the properties that were on this list. And residents are even given a shorter amount of time to get their properties demoed, right? So it's like, if the city can't even do it within a year's time, how can residents be expected to do it within, I think it's like 60 or 90 days or however long certain people are given. So I think that process begs to be looked at, because it's virtually impossible, particularly in a city like this, to reach that type of deadline when you're talking about demolition of a property. It's just like too many processes. And then you have people who are held up now in court for misdemeanor charges because they weren't able to do X, Y, and Z. So just want to add that to the conversation.
I just like to add, most of our discussion here is centered around the concerns about the rights of owners and citizens. What's missing is that governmental units, be it city, county, state, or whomever, have a responsibility to look after the safety of the citizens in the city. And when we have properties like that house sitting up there at 1164 Union, I believe it is, that is, if you get a good strong wind, 40, 50 miles an hour, and a child riding down the street with a bicycle or whatnot, that thing could fall on you and kill them. There's citizens' rights have limitations. And then at some point, government's gotta have some kind of right to protect these
Should
citizens.
And no one's arguing that, by the way.
My final comment is, one thing that I think people are also missing is a lot of property in Benton Harbor is not even owned by people in Benton Harbor. So you have out of town owners, and I'm not gonna protect them, I'm sorry. It
That's
needs to
right,
be
do
taken
that.
care of, and I'm not going to say, oh, we're gonna slap you on the wrist. We have law and order, we have to follow the rules, and the rules should be followed. So if that happens to be a misdemeanor, well, you had a lot of time to take care of it. It didn't get, the fire didn't happen yesterday. These homes are sitting here for months and months and months and months and months.
Years.
Oh, it's okay, it's Benton Harbor, it's not okay. It needs to be taken care of.
Amen.
Last comment, go ahead.
Me?
No,
Oh, I'm listening.
no, Commissioner, oh, you had your hand up?
No, ma'am.
Well, when I look back at right around the city, I know who owns a lot of these houses. Barron County Land Bank, Barron County, and the city don't have any mechanism to make them do anything. We spoke of that house on Union. It was horrible. They had mattresses all the way around the house, and every animal that could come is there. And they did nothing for years. So
I did.
would a criminal charge or a civil charge make the county do anything? If they're the biggest corporate of what's happening in the city, and yeah, we got other people buying houses, and we have some houses that's been boarded up for 30 years. So back in the day when we had another attorney, I asked them to change those rules to be civil instead of criminal. And she did, but she made it sure that it was only for downtown. They could not be criminally charged under our international housing code or any other thing that we have. So she changed that for the residents of downtown. And that was years ago. So now, here we are in 22, and we cannot change the rules for the. If you don't take in account of poverty and where our people are standing and go to them where they are, shame on us. Our most horrible thing that we have to deal with is poverty. And for the last 5 decades, number one was jobs for us. It's still jobs. 5 decades, we've been asking for the same thing. So now's the time for us to change our priorities and help our residents out.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
So all due respect, if staff would have been able to finish the presentation, we could have answered some of these questions, and not spent this 12 minutes talking about that. There's some things that you just brought up that I was trying to talk about, but we want to let everybody come up and talk, and now I got 5 minutes, so you get 4 minutes to hear what I have to say.
Send
So,
us the email, please.
some of these issues, I'll work back to what she's talking about. If it's been 50 years, shame on us, I've only been here 24, so it should have been addressed. What we're proposing in chapter 20 would alleviate all the discussion we just had.
20.
The problem that we have, so we're working on chapter 20. We wanted to get presented, as we get into it, that's the housing ordinance. It grows more and more legs and wings. The 3 main things that we started with, that we were actually bringing to add, I'm gonna read to you, but as I get into the research from other cities and ordinances, there are some other things that we need to also inject in here, and I'd rather bring you one complete proposal than we hit 20 this month and a couple more months. That's housing. So, chapter 20, just kind of give you information, and I can give you the report as is, but it's going to probably double some things we want to add. So we're submitting this report to the legislative committee, revision chapter 20 housing. We talked about landlord requirements. We're proposing a few revisions. So one of the things we have talked about and we're now required is for dwellings that are used as rentals to require the landlords to have at least fire insurance. We're proposing to have fire insurance, that they require that fire insurance. So if there is a fire, the process we're talking about doesn't take years, it takes the months directly related to and having the money in escrow in order to tear that down. Was the first thing I'm trying to get to. Again, Benton Harbor, the rationale, Benton Harbor consists of approximately 70% rentals. Most owners do not, actually almost all of them don't have fire insurance for these properties. The reason we have so many burnout structures, because no one had insurance, nor did they care to. And we're held accountable. Of course, we have many that need to be demolished. The second thing we wanted to bring up, which somebody made a point of, these people don't live in town. We're proposing that the ordinance impose a section that requires a resident agent. That basically says you have to have somebody that lives within 30 miles, 10 miles, whatever you want to say, of the city. So if we have an issue, we can contact Mr. Little's resident agent of 554 Columbus. Mr. Little, here's the issue that you have. Not sending certified notices to Arizona and Chicago and Washington, and they come back. Now we're stuck in that situation. So we want to ask the commission to consider adding a requirement for a resident agent. We have somebody we can talk to right now. The other thing was the dwelling insurance, and also, again, as we do research, and this is very important, I think speaks to Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Little's points, that if there is even, so we have a requirement for a dwelling to be registered as rental, but we don't have, and other cities do, requirement for vacant and abandoned cities to also be registered. And to have them have to pay a fee for that. So we can, at any given point, run a report that says we have these 114 or 50 or whatever the number is, unregistered properties, so that we have our hand on them from the beginning. So somebody says, hey, I moved them out of my building, it's gonna be closed down, that's fine, but still needs to be registered. I think if we have a better registration process, it will eliminate some of these things. We're asking the commission to propose, and whatever number you say is fine, but we're asking to at least require $10,000 of dwelling fire insurance. It's not a whole lot, but that at least would cover a lot of, not all, but a lot of the demolition when we get the check from escrow to demolish a house that may have caught on fire. So that's what we're asking for the committee to consider. And again, there's some other things that we need to add and put in. We've been working with Rick Rock with the city attorney, the city clerk, because some things we got to figure out where they go and how they go. But as we look at chapter 20, it grows and grows, and we want to protect the city so that these things aren't hanging out there forever. They're dealt with in an expeditious manner, quickly and efficiently. So although 25.
Don't forget the CO.
So that's part of the issue. So that's a good point. So I'll end with that. So we have a CO and there's a certificate of compliance technically in our ordinance and certificate of occupancy. Well, in most cities, they are kind of one of the same. So a certificate of compliance simply says that a house or structure meets all the basic whatever. The CO says it is now basically able to be occupied, which is kind of one of the same. It's kind of like tomato. So one of the things that as I got into this and it started to unravel pieces of the onion were being peeled, do we need to have two separate processes? Because the way the CO process reads, Mr. Mitchell, other cities call the certificate of compliance. Are they one of the same? Rick and I haven't talked about this yet. Are they one of the same? Or are they separate? Do we need two separate processes? Because really, it's the CC in our ordinance, no one even knew about it.
To get a certificate of occupancy, you have to be compliant, so it seems redundant and duplicative and
Yes,
confusing.
that's why, one of the examples of why this wasn't, as we dug deeper, wasn't quite ready to come to you yet. Hoping we can get this number one item on next month to get it pushed forward, so I'll
Just a little history, and I'm gonna try to see if I can dig up a copy of yours. But we first tackled this thing back in the eighties, when the city had a very powerful landlords association that was in court with us darn near every week on different things. And we put in a requirement for rental registration and required that there be inspections of whatever before a house can be rented. But then, once the inspections were completed, that's when we put in the certificate of occupancy. And at that time, we had tied it and it was working, and I don't know what happened afterward. It may have been changing the laws. We had a requirement that the water, gas, and electric utilities could not be turned on in those properties until they saw that certificate of occupancy.
all that stuff right there.
And that's how we set it up back then, because we even at one point had gone over and got with the chief judge and had a Wednesday night housing court right here in this room to take all of our ordinances and violations and so forth, instead of going over across the river, we brought them in there and dealt with it.
We want to be a complete package, and that, you just raised a couple other great issues.
Yeah, because, I mean, how can you occupy a house where the water, gas, and lights are not on? The sons was moved on. So that was one of the requirements. They even got that in the code, you know.
When I bought my house in the city, I had to come to the city, because there was a previous water bill that I could not get my, my deed until that was taken care of. I mean, personal performance in Texas, so I had to do it. So that, I think that's, yeah, speaks to your point, so way order, so.
And those inspections are
Thank you
important
so
to
much.
the
That's great.
Thank you, Chief.
Next month?
Those inspections are important to have because people have gone in units and done rebuilding, restructuring in units. And the firefighters go into a fight a fire and they're thinking it's one thing and then they find it's a whole different thing. So there are a whole bunch of things that have to be considered. That's why we've been taking our time trying to put this piece together.
Thank you. Thank you. Amen.
Commissioner Isom, questions, comments? Any questions, comments about? Yes, ma'am.
Chair, some months ago, we spoke about a discussion, and I think they asked for our attorney to bring an opinion on it, on rent control, rent stabilization. And I think we just need to have a discussion about it. I don't know where it's gonna go, but some of the horror stories that I'm hearing all across the nation lets me know that we need to look into it for protection. So I'll ask you again if we can have that discussion, as well as have the attorney have some opinion about the pros and cons of rent stabilization ordinance.
I don't know if he has any, if he's able to do that tonight, but.
Well, Commissioner, I know that I've been working with Director McGinnis about rental insurance registration, vacant property registration, but not about rental stabilization.
Well, I figured that since it's been about 3 months and I hadn't heard anything from anybody and it hasn't been back on the agenda, so I thought I would speak on it right now.
Yes, 2 meetings ago. Rest stabilization, so there's.
Thank you, Chair.
Maybe we'll tell.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, hey, so this is good.
70% of the houses are units in Bentonville are West Point. I mean, there are homes, but I'm talking about how, if they, this occupancy, this certificate of occupancy, how would they become compliant? There are a lot, like I have relatives that live in the city,
That's
And
not
I-
one question.
It'll come up again.
Yeah.
We're gonna bring it up again.
How did it become compliant?
He had a question about the number of rentals that's in Benton Harbor. How do all,
Well, with the whole occupancy, certificate of occupancy and things of that nature, how do people become compliant? I don't think inspections happen at rentals on a consistent basis. I'll say that.
But
So, I mean, code compliance, I'm sure, would be the people that would do that. Is that correct?
Yes.
what needs to happen is they need to follow the process of coming in to get those inspections scheduled. Now, so what is it that's missing?
The owners that have to come in and get, if it's a rental property. So you're saying this, the citizens that rent need to come and schedule
So
a.
right now, every year, the city still requires rental registration. And when you register, you file an application, application fee, and then you're supposed to schedule an inspection so that the city can go and make sure that the home is properly outfitted and safe for, rental, because it's not your own home, so it's a business, so we're making sure it's safe for other people. Now, the problem is, we don't have a lot of people who are actually registering their apartment, so, and then how do you enforce that? You have to, you just can't go knock on doors and say, hey, is this a rental? It takes someone it's just a slow and never-ending process, unfortunately. And we've got two guys in code compliance, and who have to deal with building inspections, have to deal with rental inspections, have to deal with, all other code compliance, and zoning issues, and there's a lot for two guys.
I understand. Another quick question. Could CDGB money be used in code and compliance to supplement those that are still here? As far as CDGB or HUD money? As far as compliance?
When you say
I'm asking.
supplement, how do you mean it?
Well, there are companies that will do it. I mean, we pay companies to do other things.
I'm sorry, do what?
You pay other companies, there are companies that will do inspections.
We had a company, well, no, our last building inspector, zoning administrator left and joined a company who sends out people to municipalities.
Right.
Ted Hansen. And so he left the city and went to a company, and then the company then sent him out to New Buffalo. So that's how that works.
And to answer your question, for years, we contracted with like a plumbing company out here for the person who was our plumbing inspector and various others and so forth that did inspections for us. But to answer your question, federal funds, all federal funds, HUD, ARPA, whatever, cannot be used to supplement for what are normal city responsibilities. We can do some additional things, but we cannot substitute using federal money to do things that are normal city responsibilities.
That's why there are fees attached to it to cover the cost for those services.
And in fact, some years ago, in fact, I remember we got in a court situation where we came out of it with a requirement that we do a fee study to make sure that the fees were justified and that they went to maintain the cost of doing the inspections and so forth.
is there any other, look like Miss Deidre walked out in terms of she was supposed to give an update of the subcommittee.
Would you like me to move that next?
Yeah. All right, is there any other questions before we? All right, this
Good
meeting
job.
is adjourned.
Good job, good job.
Thank you.
There we go. You said keep it. Bless you.
Yes.